Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bold, Beautiful Borderline podcast. It's your host, Sarah, and today I have a special guest with a lot of knowledge to share. And I'm very excited about the knowledge because you all know that I've said this podcast is a little bit selfish. And this topic is all about me and my future. No, this topic is about parenting with mental illness and how to be the best parents we can be if we want to, and how to support our children that we are raising, and a variety of other things. But we have Dr. Michelle Sherman here with us today, and I am so excited for you to tell us all about yourself and your knowledge.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Sarah. I so appreciate the opportunity. I'm happy to be with you here today.
Yeah, thank you. So tell us, how did you become like Dr. Sherman? How did you get here? What has your path to this sort of specialty been like?
Yeah. Well, I was a math major in college, and I got to the point I was like, shoo, this ain't clicking. It's not making sense to me. And honestly, it didn't feel like it was a sense of meaning and purpose for me and really using my gifts, frankly. So I switched to psychology and have never looked back. And so I have been a psychologist now for about 30 years. So I've been doing this a long time. And my real passion throughout my career is really working with families who love someone living with a mental illness, trauma, PTSD, personality disorder, etc. So that's really where I've kind of focused my career. And it started, to be honest with you, was I was working in a VA, a Veterans Affairs hospital, in the mid 1990s. So probably before some of your listeners were even born. But it was really a cool outpatient mental health clinic. And you know what, Sarah, I was just really struck by all of the family members in the waiting room. Their loved one would go into their group or individual or medication appointment, whatever else, and come out and then they'd leave. I'm like, hold on. We have all these people out here with commonality of need, experience, confusion, stigma, sadness, etc. Let's do something about it. So I got my very first little grant in the mid 1990s and started creating family education programs. And so that's honestly where it started. And it kind of has grown from there. So my professional career has been largely dedicated to supporting families, as well as in my personal life. I've been collaborating with my mother, who is a mental health advocate and an educator. So we've been writing books for families for about 20 years. So it's professional passion, but also, Sarah, equally important is my lived experience as a family member of having people that I love that experience mental illness, trauma, things of that nature. And so that fuels, motivates, keeps me working equally as hard as my academic, my researcher, teaching, therapist, all that hat. My lived experience is just as important. So that's where I am and kind of how I've gotten to what I've been doing, and learned a lot, honestly, from families that I've served. I do largely couples therapy now than individual therapy. Volunteer with our NAMI board. I've been in NAMI, Oklahoma for about 14 years, and I'm with NAMI, my county here in Minnesota. And so have been involved through research and therapy and teaching in such a lot of ways, and all trying to look at this angle of supporting families, in which a member, as I'm actually only focused on the adult with mental illness. I don't focus on like childhood disorders. That's just not my expertise, to be honest. I focus on when there's adult with a mental illness or trauma.
Awesome. And how has that been for your family members to like observe you in this process? Have they ever felt like, "Oh, wow, you're getting really into this and this could impact all of us." Has that ever kind of come up for you?
Interestingly, no, not that they told us anyway. They've actually been really proud and really pleased in seeing the importance and appreciating the passion. It's only been tremendous support and validation of the importance and keep going. And we've had some suicide in the family. So, I mean, some of these people are not even here anymore. And so it's a long-term commitment to this issue that is really embraced. Like with anything, I'm sure even like with your podcast, Sarah, it takes a village to write books, to develop things. So it's absolutely a team effort. It's not just me. It's not just myself and my mom. It's a team.
Yeah. But how cool for you and your mom though. Like what a unique bonding kind of and spanning like life, like across a
Yeah.
lifespan, like your whole career doing this with her. That's so fascinating.
It's very cool, very special. And we both say, Sarah, 99% of the time it works great. There is 1%. Like, I'll give you a funny story. She, in one of our books, she was like insistent, like she wanted the teenager in a book that we wrote to write haiku poetry. Like, Mom, no, teenagers don't write haiku poetry. So we still joke there's no haiku poetry in our books. She still jokes about we have different opinions. And of course, right? But 99% of the time we work really well because, writing, clinical work, speaking is a lot of time and energy and work. And so we lift each other up and encourage each other in a lot of ways. Plus, she lends the teacher role, which is huge because I write for professionals. I edit a journal and do all these articles and crap. She's like, no, you have to know how to speak to the lay person, the family member, the teenager. And so she helped put both of our books in kind of interactive activities, reflection questions using layperson language, which has been huge.
Yeah, wow. You'll have to, before we leave, tell me a couple of those books that people would be interested in, because if there's that much interaction, I can imagine how like one could really soak up that data, you know?
That's the idea. And there are no pages with just words. All pages have activities and charts and reflection activities. And that's how I believe people learn, right? I mean, you can, and plus there's so much online now compared to 30 years ago. I don't need to tell people the symptoms of bipolar disorder or BPD. You can Google it and find that information. What I think people need is how to communicate, how to solve problems, how to set limits, how to navigate the healthcare system, what to tell other people, parenting tips, what to tell the children, all these sorts of things. So that's what I did, was I took all these skills that I've learned from families and developed and put them in a book format.
I like it. Okay, so let's talk about like the work with family members. So if you were working with a parent who has an adult child with a mental
Mhm.
illness and that adult child is really starting to struggle and the parent's coming to you like, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do. I'm sure this is the most common first appointment that you get. Where do you start with people?
Yeah, it's a great question. A huge part of it is listening to their story. That's where I start, is let them kind of share their journey. And it depends on where they are. If it's just at the very, very beginning or they've been doing this for a while, but often there's so much confusion, right? Like, what's going on? Is this due to drugs? Is this a phase? Is this adolescence? Is this hormones? What's going on? And are they just going to kind of get better and snap out of it, sort of thing? Or is this something that's going to be like for their whole lifetime? Are they going to be like my dad? Mental illness often runs in the families. And so there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of sadness. Like, what's going on? This is not my child. This is not my hopes and dreams for this person. When actually it is, of course, the same person with all the strengths and beautiful things that you've taught them. But they're struggling with an illness. So a lot of it is listening. A lot of it is information, and then hooking them up with resources. I'm a big believer in, it's important for therapists, especially social workers are generally so great at this, to know your community resources. So be it a NAMI class, be it a family connections group for families who love someone with BPD, be it your local DBT programs or whatever else, is helping people know what's available. Because to me, so much of this is shame and isolation. And so when we keep it a secret, all the levels of shame surrounding it, then it can make it even worse. So helping people know they're not alone, providing information on what's going on, connecting them with resources, and listening and validating their experience. Because often the whole family system gets so focused on the person with the symptoms or the illness. And of course, that makes sense. But what about for you? What's it like for you? And I want to create a space. I want to create an opportunity for their needs and feelings to be heard and validated and supported as well. So we talk a lot about things like balancing, juggling, supporting your loved one with caring for yourself and setting limits and healthy boundaries. Even if your loved one, for example, is angry or depressed or whatever else, it's maybe still important for you to go play pickleball with your friends. Or maybe still important for you to go to your therapy session or for you to go to your church group or whatever it may be. So helping families learn, be supportive, find ways of being available, and also set limits and boundaries for the essential role of self-care. Because with some mental illnesses, certainly not all, but some, it can be that marathon, not a sprint idea. And so although there are crises, of course, that can involve more acute needs, let's talk about, what actually may be needing to sustain you. Actually, I was giving a presentation, a free community workshop the other day, and I said something that I think some of the family members kind of like, wow. And I said, it's okay to disappoint your loved one sometime. And I believe that. Being at their beck and call 24/7 is not helpful for them, nor for you or your relationship. So self care is not selfish. Self care is essential. And so some of those are some of the early themes that we talk about.
Yeah. Mm. It's such an important entry point to try to get in as soon as possible, not
Yes.
only for us as people who are mentally ill, but for the family members, because like I have seen enmeshment do awful things, like in my life, in my family's life, and my clients' lives. It's like if we cannot go down that path, we are saving ourselves so much precious time and resources and energy and heartache.
I agree. I agree. And again, I like to always look for positive intent, meaning they're probably trying to be helpful and they're
Mm.
scared, right? What drives so much behavior is fear. It's like, oh gosh, maybe I should cuddle them and protect them, whatever else. But and at crisis times that may be necessary and appropriate, but for the long run, that's not going to be good for anybody. So yeah, helping to overcome that enmeshment and help them set goals. Because to me, so much of recovery, I don't mean that in the terms of substance use, but in terms of mental health recovery, of well-being, using my gifts, having community, having a purpose, reason to get out of bed, is all about moving beyond being in that stuck place of dependent on someone that could be 24/7 in your bedroom or playing video games or whatever else. It's like, how can we help you? And sometimes families enable that, right? It's like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
giving you everything, and like that's maybe not what they need.
Yeah,
Easier said than done, but a huge challenge. I agree.
yeah, yeah. Well, when you love someone, right? I mean, I
Right.
imagine that's all you want to do.
Exactly. You want to help them and you think that you're being helpful.
Mhm.
And some people, for example, don't even have insight that they have an illness, right? I don't know if you've heard of the term anosognosia, but that concept that just like kind of when people maybe after a stroke or have dementia, sometimes they don't know that they have deficits. It could be the same thing with some mental illnesses, especially schizophrenia, bipolar, and things, that they simply don't know that they have an illness. And so, if family members, in trying to be helpful, say, hey, you have to go to therapy or we're going to kick you out, or you have to, all these sorts of things, it can rupture the relationship, which makes things even worse. And so, finding skills and finding ways of working with your family member that are going to be more effective at helping the relationship rather than being enmeshed or totally cut off. It's tricky, it's nuanced, it's challenging. But those are some of the skills we talk about in our writings.
I love it. You know, the term walking on eggshells has been
Yeah.
so like demonized, and I don't agree with that term. And this is the dialectics. Like,
Mhm.
I know that if I had been my partner or parent, and even sometimes with myself, I sometimes feel like I'm tiptoeing around my symptoms
Mhm.
and I have insight into them. And so when other
Right.
people don't have insight into them, it's like you don't want to do the wrong thing, but you also can't walk on eggshells and like trying to find that line. And for those of us who are like mentally ill and are in a hard point with it, it can be really hard to have any grace for someone who crosses
Yeah.
over or under the line. And I know that there's been a lot of times in my life that I haven't had that grace.
Mhm. I think that's really lovely. I love how that is said. And again, when people are in distress, by definition, we're often more self focused. And it's harder to be aware of how it's impacting other people. And some people don't have insight. Like you said, some people do. But it's hard to think about, oh, wow, this must be really hard for them or them really struggling for them. And so I love how you said that. That was really beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's talk parenting because I want to spend a lot of time here.
Uh-huh.
Again, selfish. I'm 31. I would love to be a mother. Like mothering sounds like the most amazing, thing in the world, all that good stuff. Um, I was raised around like quite a large family system, and then that family system dwindled, and there's not a lot left. But I've always wanted to be a mother. I've always wanted to have that energy and those children running around and watch them grow into whoever they're going to be, and like hopefully have some queer kids and do the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
But I also recognize there's a lot of limitations that I see myself having compared to a person that wouldn't be parenting with BPD or any of these other things that I experience. And then you
Mhm.
throw in like the money factor and the time factor and all of these things, and you start to
Yes.
convince yourself you really can't parent. And so I wonder, like, are you hearing people? I'm sure you've heard people say this, but how do you
Yeah.
respond when you hear people make statements like that?
Yeah. It's a hard decision. It's a big decision because it's affected by so many feelings. And I'm going to actually preface this by saying mental illness or not, parenting is hard. It stresses, strains just the pure fact of sleep deprivation, the fact that children seriously don't come with manuals in terms of how to raise. And so being a parent is hard. And again, mental illness or not, being a parent can be one of the richest, most beautiful and joyful and senses of meaning that people can ever have. And so if people somewhere say that, I may say, help me understand. Tell me what your concerns are, what worries you, what scares you, or what do you think might get in the way of undermining your ability to be the kind of parent that you want to be. And so I'd kind of flesh that out and asking them. But to be honest, actually, the research shows people living with mental illness are just as likely to be parents as those who aren't. Okay, so actually, a lot of people are, and a lot of people can be extremely effective parents. So I do not see these as mutually exclusive. And so, yeah, I'd provide information, I'd try to understand. And then I think, frankly, again, all parents, mental illness or not, can find the experience easier with having supports. And so, talking about who might be your supports, what might be some things that you want to put into place, what are your resources for having, even like a nanny to someone in the beginning to help with those early months in terms of getting sleep and things of that nature, who are people that could support you. Where are you at with your own mental health? Obviously big decisions about taking medications or not during pregnancy, during nursing and things, so talking to a healthcare provider that you trust. Fortunately, many mental health medications are okay for some people to take during pregnancy. Of course, that's a personal decision made with your healthcare provider. I'm not providing medication advice at all, but there are a lot of decision things to think through. But again, the good news is that many people can parent effectively, and there can be parenting supports. There are a number of universities and programs and things that offer supports for people living with mental illness in terms of being more effective parents. But again, don't try to do it on your own because that's a key. Mental illness or not, again, for burnout, increased risk of having more symptoms and things like that. So important to allow others to help you.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any of these programs that you're talking about at universities and such. Like, I'm not familiar with, I haven't done a lot of research into it because it's always sort of been this like being queer and being mentally ill. It's kind of like there's this like double whammy of like, oh God, trying to get pregnant would be hard, and I have to make the decision to get pregnant. So I haven't done a lot of research into that, but there's programs that are helping people who are mentally ill parent.
Pulling it up. Hang on just a second, because I'm just right here. Here is I did a little talk in St. Louis last week, and here is a resource list that I hand out. I'd be absolutely happy to share it with you. But one of them is from Temple University. They have a collaborative on community inclusion of people with psychiatric disabilities, and they have whole sections on parenting with mental health challenges. So I'd
Wow,
be happy to give you that link if you want to share with your listeners. And
please.
they have things like um, not only tips, how to talk to other family members, but they have something called advanced self-advocacy plans. Have you heard of these before?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, they're really cool. They are basically, I'm just going to make up a hypothetical. Let's say that I'm living with a severe bipolar disorder, and I know that at times I may have hospitalizations and things of that nature. During a relatively calm time, I would work on this plan. And again, it's all free on this website. I didn't make it or anything. I'm just giving this resource. That when I am needing hospitalizations or when I am psychotic or when I'm doing self-injurious behavior, what do I want to happen? Who do I want to be told? Who do I not want to be told? What should I tell my boss? Who can my child or children go to? what hospital do you want me to take to, all these sorts of things. So you create this plan in advance. Okay. And this is specifically about parenting. Okay. So those are some through Temple University. And then Brandeis University has a National Research Center for Parents with Disabilities. And they have a whole new program called Parenting Well. And I can again give you that website, but they have all sorts of resources to support parents. So yes, there absolutely are. There's certainly, I know you're in Washington State. I have to say I don't know the specific Washington State resources, but there absolutely are online resources to help people in their role as parents.
Yeah, that's so encouraging because you just don't hear about it in person verbally. I mean, I've talked to my psychiatrist and my therapist about this, but
Yeah.
other than that, I don't talk to, my friends aren't talking about these things because most of my friends have decided they're not going to parent. But
Okay.
I've got to ask some of my friends who have parented if they've heard about some of these things, just to sort of see what the knowledge is out there.
I bet they haven't because there's not a lot of information being put out there. So I will send you after the discussion, if that's okay with you, the links to both of those. And again, I have nothing to do with them. I'm not getting any kickback. This is all free. This is all just information that's out there. So I'll be happy to do those. We also have in our latest book for adults, Loving Someone with Mental Illness or History of Trauma, we have a whole chapter on parenting. And so there's lots of good information about deciding whether or not to have a child, how to draw upon both of your strengths as parenting, how to support each other in parenting. What do we tell the children? How do we have those hard conversations about might the children be at increased risk for developmental illness themselves? So there's a huge amount to talk about in this whole parenting arena. But in addition to those two free online resources, I'd like to just mention our book for adults. We also have a book for teenagers whose parent has a mental illness. And that's actually a book for teens and a good book for parents to read because it helps you then know how to talk to the teenagers about it. What are some of the things they're thinking and feeling? So I've created a couple of resources that, again, I'll share with you at the end that also can be helpful for the whole parenting journey.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. What a good conversation today.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yeah. Um,
And by the
so
way, the queer element, holy buckets, queer people are great parents too. So I appreciate your comment about stigma around that, but oh goodness, we've known that forever. That, yeah, there may be some additional vocabulary or word things to talk about in terms of mom and mom or dad, dad, or whomever else, or they, them. There may be issues like that, but there's no research actually that I know of saying that um, people who are LGBT have, less successful parenting, actually, and the opposite.
yes.
LGBT people are just as effective parents. So, although I hear you're saying, and I don't want to discount your feelings about maybe the double stigma sort of stuff, I would rather show what I know about the research about that and show that that isn't supported in the literature.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think queer people are more likely to have successful marriages, actually. That wasn't my experience in my first marriage, but I have borderline, so we're just gonna blame it on that. But anyways, so talking to kids and kids having feelings about their parents' mental health is
Yeah.
obviously super important and very fair. How 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 are you teaching people to have that dialogue with their children when they're young versus, oh my gosh, when they are teenage age? That is a gnarly time.
It is. I love that. Gnarly. It's so true. I think you start early and it's an ongoing conversation. Of course, the words you use and how you describe it are going to be different when they're 5 versus when they're 15. But just like if mom or dad had leukemia, or rheumatoid arthritis, or breast cancer, you talk about it, right? And people bring in meal trains and cards and flowers and sorts of stuff. Often, sadly, that doesn't happen with mental illness. If someone has a self-harm or suicide attempt or bipolar disorder, admission for medication management or stabilization. So trying to realize that for the kids, they feel the stigma too. Okay, what do they tell their friends? Why maybe they can't have friends over if their parent is in a bad place or all these sorts of things. So helping children have tools for communicating about this, having them have honest information, knowing what is going on in words that work, and talking to your own therapist and psychiatrist can be a way of helping with that. And then other key message are it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You're not responsible, getting back to the enmeshment issue. You're not responsible for curing or being parentified or taking care of your parent. Simultaneously, I believe the message of there are things you can do to help your parent. Tell them you love them. Give them a text message. Give them a hug. Maybe take out the trash without being asked. I'm not parentifying here, but we want to help people we love, right? Okay, so it's okay to do those sorts of things, but also incredibly important two other things. One is for kids to be able to be kids and to be able to play and get away from the family and do their own activities and friends and play pickleball, whatever else their thing is. But for kids to be able to have supports outside of the family is super important. And secondly, the research is clear that there is a genetic component for some, not all, but for some mental illnesses. And I'm a believer in honesty. Now, again, you don't say this at 5 years old necessarily, but I actually do believe that it is important to be honest and say, yeah, part of what affects our brain, of our hair color, all sorts of things is the way in which we were born, our genes. That's not something you have a lot of control over, but you do have a lot of control over all these other sorts of things. And so, our book for teens, I'm Not Alone, the whole section of it is on promoting resilience, which is both if you do perhaps develop an illness, what are some tools you can already have in place that may help you decrease the severity and or get help early? And maybe even we can prevent the development of having some of the illnesses in the first place. Okay, so that's the whole chunk is like, let's focus on what you have control over rather than some things you don't. Again, that's my opinion. I do think honesty is helpful, but the open, ongoing conversation and giving repeated messages of you're not to blame, you didn't do anything wrong, it's not your fault, and continuing to help them have supports and regular care and contact with doctors who are going to be helping them, regular exercise, staying in contact socially and not isolating, being careful about screen time. Um, Fruits and vegetables, avoiding substances, all these sorts of things that we know are important for all young people, but certainly including people whose parent has a mental illness.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back because I do remember having some of that genetic dialogue when I was younger,
Uh-huh.
but it was really fear-based. And so I don't think that I could take it,
Okay.
especially around alcohol, which I'm an addict. I've been sober almost 3 years.
Way to go.
Thank you.
Oh,
But I do recall it being sort of like, yeah, we don't go there at all.
uh,
Fear-based. If you drink, you'll be an alcoholic. And it was like, well, I'm just gonna test those waters and make sure that I am able to drink and I'm not an alcoholic, and that didn't work out. But it would be interesting to talk to a child about the difference between, like, yes, you have these genetic predisposition
Hmm?
possibilities, maybe,
Yeah,
and how we interact with our environment and our behavior can really like offset them, and explaining that difference to children because I don't remember that. And again, I'm in my 30s, so that wasn't really talked about then, but
right.
I love that education piece.
Sarah, you know what? I think it's still not being talked about now, sadly. I'm afraid that those conversations are still not happening. In parts because parents don't know how. These are hard conversations. There are two mental health professionals and we're struggling with it. Much less if you're in the middle of a painful place mentally, or you're supporting a partner or someone else who's doing mental health problems. This is hard. And frankly, a huge part of my career focus is trying to help move the needle, even just 1%, to get more healthcare professionals to consistently ask, do you have children? Much less, how are the children doing? Because so often they're just invisible and really in the system, when again, they can be, as we said earlier, a source of reason to go to therapy, to stay on your medications, all those sorts of things. So I believe it's important on so many levels, because otherwise, these are the next kids in our mental health clinics, right?
Yeah,
So what can we do now for prevention?
absolutely. With the children becoming resilient, like that section in your book, do you
Yeah,
see any like teenagers that you're working with? Are they excited about this idea of resilience? Like, what is that, how did
there.
they interact with it?
Yeah, you know, We have that old saying that common sense isn't common practice. And so we're like, okay, you've probably all been told to sleep regularly, to exercise well. I mean, people like know this sort of stuff. But what I've experienced is that if people say, well, you mean if I do these things, it can affect not only like my physical health and my mom getting on my back for eating Lucky Charms, but it can actually help maybe prevent me from dealing the illness or coping better. That's some leverage. Because as you used the word earlier, I fully agree. It's a fear. It's a fear-based thing. And if we just get stuck on fear without giving tools of what to do about it, that's not a good place. So rather, the name of our company is Seeds of Hope. We're trying to provide honest information, yet simultaneously hope. What can you do about it? So that's the focus. And yes, teenagers like that because they want to do something about it. What can I do? So it's tangible, practical skills.
And I also see that as building empathy too, like the
Yeah,
not fear, but the having empathy for people who might be experiencing this. And, you know, to the extent that you're able, you don't want to have to live like this. Let's try to make some
absolutely.
changes.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. We were writing the second edition of this book for teens, and we have, you know, with all of our books, a lot of reviewers, mental health professionals, teachers, clergy, people lived experience, families, etc. And for our teenage book, lots of teenagers. And we had these young people. I reviewed the teenage book, and one of them said, "You're missing something." And we said, "What?" They said, "Grace, giving your parent grace," which is exactly what you just said. I'm like, bingo, you're right. Now, I would like to say Michelle Sherman's opinion, okay, that any mental illness at all does not condone or rationalize or excuse abuse. So I'm not saying that, okay, but giving your parent grace that they may be doing the best they can and they're really hurting. I'm like, whoo, that was good. So we added that actually to both books, frankly, that idea of giving grace. So I agree, grace, empathy. I think that's really important, just as a human, much less as a kid. These are complicated, sophisticated concepts that we're talking about for kids to wrap their head around. So this is not a one-time conversation.
I want to know who raised that child.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, as a friend of my sister's actually a good mom, huh?
Yes, a good mom.
Yeah.
So much of the, at least for the BPD community, of women considering parenting comes back to that idea of for decades, we've been being told that we are abusive and we are manipulative and we are these things, right? And again, some of us have done things that are abusive or manipulative, and most of
Mhm.
us have behaved in ways that had unintentional consequences of that.
Yeah.
Um, and, you know, I know for me, like all these years later of DBT and the right medication and having
Mhm.
people in my life that aren't harmful to me anymore and getting sober, I don't
Mhm.
do things that are unintentionally manipulative or abusive anymore, to my knowledge. Nobody's told me that I have. But so many years of being told that you were leads you then to believe, like, God, I can't parent because I'll be an abuser.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's
That
such a hard, it's hard to like, you get stuck there.
yeah. I can totally see that with any label, with anything that's like you are bad or wrong or lacking skills in this area. It's like, okay, I must be that way forever then. Whereas I think a lot about parenting, a lot about relationships can be skills, things that you can learn and change. So even if you have had a, let's just pick a symptom and say difficulty with affect regulation. Okay. Then we throw in some sleep deprivation, we throw in a screaming baby and things like, is it going to push me? Yeah. Does that mean I'm necessarily going to go back to cutting or whatever always? No, that you've learned skills and you gain support in coping with the challenges of parenting, of whatever else it might be. So keeping that community of your DBT group or your friends or whomever else it might be that can help you with these things and shift your own perspective of self is huge because those labels, those terms we even put on ourselves can be limiting, can't they? And if you really have, if one, excuse me, really has a value, I want to be a parent. This is important to me. Then doing some of that groundwork in advance, the reading, the support, the talking to professionals, and your support system of. I want to do this, but I'm going to need some help, and these are some things I know I'm going to need help with, and who can be on my team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the team part. I am so lucky to have a really solid team. It's been 5 years with my team now, and like I texted my psychiatrist yesterday about something, and she was saying like, yeah, there's something there we need to tweak then. Can you get in next week,
Oh,
9 p.m.? And that is like I am very aware of the privilege that I have in that it's taken
yeah,
me to create and many providers that I went through, but not
yeah.
everyone is so lucky to be able to have a team like that.
You
But
are very lucky.
you know, and
You
there's
worked hard to make that happen, right?
huh?
You've worked hard to make that happen.
Yes, and I pay out of pocket at
Oh, yeah.
times also because of that. Like I can't lose that. And so if my insurance changes or whatever,
Right.
so we make a lot of sacrifices to be well, and I think
Yeah.
the team part is the most important. So we have a lot of family members and partners who listen to the podcast of people with borderline. If they were going to build a team, who do you think should be on their team or
That's a
could be
great
on their
question.
team?
To me, you know what? It's less who they are than what they can do for you in your relationship with them. So for some people, it may be a neighbor, someone from NAMI, someone from AA group, Al-Anon, minister, clergy, sister, whatever else. It may be none of those people. Some people may find better doing with people they don't really know on virtual meetings or things like this, or people who really maybe initially they don't have as close relationship with, but they find out that they're able to be there for them. So to me, it's more who can support you, who can meet some of your needs, certainly including professionals, but not limited to them at all. Family peer support advocates can be great, and so it's who who can you count on? Who's going to be there in a non-judgmental, supportive sort of way through the good times and celebrate you as well as the challenges. So it's less the role and more the relationship is what I would say. But I would say having some professionals on board who know you, who knew you before, who can walk through the process with you, who knows your warning signs. I imagine you've talked in this podcast a lot probably about things like RAP plans or wellness plans or things like that. So hypothetically, I know for me, when I'm up for a couple nights in a row or when I'm sleeping or when I'm drinking too much, that means it's important for me to do X, Y, and Z. And so same thing with parenting. When I'm really struggling or I just want to get away from this kid or whatever else, what can I do? And so having that plan of someone who can help you.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, lots of cope ahead plans around here.
Yes, exactly. A DVD, so you
Yes.
can see. Yeah, it's huge. And so what a lot of it can be. And then I think, we talked about giving others grace, but also giving yourself grace, because parenting is hard, and we're not always going to feel good about how we handle situations. Okay. But oftentimes, if we really have that strong attachment with the relationship with a child or with other family members, we can kind of ride those waves, but really building into and finding, self-help books or parenting classes or things like that that really help you figure out what kind of parent do I want to be? How do I want to do toilet training? How do I want to do, all sorts of things you can figure out. Excuse me. But being intentional about that and having a community of people that can they can learn from. Mother's Day Out. I mean, there are so many different resources depending on where you live, different things that can help you. But giving yourself grace when you aren't living in your values either, and then get back on the horse and keep trying.
So living your values always hits so hard because you know when you're not.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And all of us at times make those sorts of choices, right? Say, okay, Helen, I can, that choice point, if you read about ACT, what can I do now? I can reassess. I can always choose again.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Well, Michelle, I have just so enjoyed having you here. Tell everyone where they can follow you, find your books. Give us just a bit of that overview.
Yeah, well, awesome. It's been really fun. Thank you, Sarah. It's been a really fun conversation. So I'm certainly on LinkedIn. My name, Michelle D. Sherman. I'm on Facebook. The company's name is Seeds of Hope Books. And the biggest thing is to go to our website, which is www.seeds with an S, seedsofhopebooks.com. You can contact me there. There are lots of free resources there on that website, including the parenting ones I've discussed, although I will email those to you as well. but you can see information about both of our books. You can find sample chapters and all sorts of information there. There are other podcasts if you want to listen about specific topics that I've had discussions with other people. So seedsofhopebooks.com is really the best place to kind of follow and or to get in contact with me. I love doing workshops and speaking engagements and things. So anyone can contact me through our website or through LinkedIn or Facebook, any of those.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll have all of those in the show notes, guys, for you to go grab and explore.
Awesome. Yeah. And I will email them to you today. But yeah, Sarah, best wishes to you as you kind of explore these questions yourself. And I just love how you kind of explore them vulnerably with your community of listeners and people who are often probably having the same questions that you are. And so thank you for the opportunity to be with you and to dialogue about a really important topic.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it and I learned a lot, so I appreciate that. And that's, you know how that goes. That always makes it to the next person, the next person.
Exactly. That's what we hope so, right? That's awesome. So bravo to you for your work with this podcast. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.